Evening, ladies and gentlemen. Ooh, wow, sorry about that. Evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the first lecture of The Narrative. The Narrative is a lecture series by young minds, and the purpose behind the narrative is for us to change the negative conversations that we have, the negative feelings, feeling marginalized, feeling like the world is against us, changing those conversations to positive conversations, basically changing the narrative. So we thought, who better to have than Khanyi Dhlomo to come speak to us about the power within you. Now, just some context. Often, let me relate my personal story. Often say, on your first day of work, you come into the firm feeling that today is the first day in my journey to become Jessica Pearson. But through that journey, I mean, there's a lot of challenges as young legal professionals that we go through. The long hours, the unrealistic deadlines, the moods. But apart from that, it's also, we see a shift in ambition. A lot of us come here wanting to be great leaders, both within law and in business, but we lose that direction because of the negative narrative, be it settling. And also, this doesn't apply just to legal professionals, but to professionals as a whole, regardless of your department. So as young minds, we felt, why not take hold and change that narrative? Why not change that story? Why not re-inspire young people to taking hold of their future, not just within the firm, but in society as a whole? One of my favorite quotes is by the controversial Kanye West, and he says, they're going to have to take my life before they take my drive. And that's the spirit that we want to encourage in professionals within the firm to impact society. So it is with my pleasure to welcome Khanyi Dhlomo, who will be speaking tonight on the power within you. I hope all of you listen, I hope that you're inspired, and I hope that you leave here with the mission to make a difference in society. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that wonderful introduction, Lebogang, and thank you so much for the invitation, young minds, to the marketing division of Cliff Decker, and to all the directors that are here. Thank you so much, and obviously to all of you. It's wonderful to be here. And I must say, you really upped the lawyer's cool factor with that Kanye quote. I was quite surprised when I got the email through Anya, who actually is my main contact here at Cliff Decker, and Taliba as well. But the email came from Anya. Cliff Decker has been Ndalo Media's legal firm for the longest time. And I wasn't surprised by the request, because I get a number of requests like these, and I don't accept them often because of time issues, balancing sort of work-life issues as a wife and a mom and an entrepreneur. And what surprised me was the title, because this idea of the power within is powerful on the one hand, but it's certainly not factual in the traditional sense. And you guys are people of facts, and you defend that, and you create convincing facts and arguments. So, but it was extremely encouraging, because I'm a big believer in the power within, and I'm a big believer in harnessing it, and I actually think that it is really the real and true power that there is. And I'll be sharing some of my insights on it, and quoting from various people. I'm a big believer in learning from others, so you'll see a lot of quotes, and then a bit of my own personal insights as well. Okay. Now, Jeremy Bentham said, the power of the lawyer is in the uncertainty of the law. I'm sure many of you have heard that quote. And I think that as lawyers, you work with a lot of uncertainty, and to introduce certainty and to be convincing, one has to be enthusiastic, one has to be confident, and certainly one has to believe in the power within. So it's an enormously important skill, I believe, or an enormously important resource to draw on if you really want to be successful and take away that uncertainty in the law. And I think this narrative lecture series, as Lebogang has explained, is really powerful and useful and necessary in its development of young lawyers to be better enabled in their jobs, to be better leaders, to deal with some of the stereotypes that are there that create barriers for connection amongst people who have different life views and backgrounds, and also create barriers in terms of progress that stops young people like yourselves from being positive impact in society. So I think this is really a useful initiative indeed, and congratulations on it. the idea of impacting society positively is enormously important to me, and that's why Ndalo Media's payoff line is positively impacting lives. And you'll see with just some of the things that we do and some of the elements of the business, we really are driven by the idea of positively impacting lives. Yes, with profits, but certainly putting impact first. I think that it's important for the impact, in fact, to be visible even before the profit. As I mentioned earlier, I think the conviction with which an argument is delivered certainly depends on a huge amount of enthusiasm on that particular issue, on that particular case, on that particular subject matter. And the word enthusiasm is an interesting one for me. A very clinical and mainstream definition is that it's intense and eager enjoyment, interest, or approval. But the definition that I think speaks to today's topic of the power within is the fact that it's derived from the Greek ontheos, which means God in you. And I don't mean God in purely the religious sense. I mean it as the source, the power, this energy, this life source that's there, that is behind all animate things, behind all life. We define it as God from a religious sense, from a metaphysical sense. We define it as an energy, and it's also defined as source, universe, whatever belief system you have. It's really kind of comes back to this power of God in you. Napoleon Hill has defined enthusiasm as, or has explained enthusiasm further by saying that if enthusiasm, if fueled by inspiration and perseverance, travels with passion and its destination is excellence. So this God in you, or this power within your enthusiasm for one subject can certainly take us very far. And I'm a huge fan of Napoleon Hill's. I don't know if you know his work and his writings. I think his most popular book is Think and Grow Rich, and also just talks very much around the power of the mind and how we can change circumstances externally by changing what's happening within us internally. And Alan Watts, the author of Fearless Soul, says you don't look out here or out there for God, something in the sky, but you look inside you. You look to the power within you. Now, I've had many instances in my career or my journey where really looking to this power within me has proved instructive, has proved necessary. I've always loved media, and for as long as I can remember as a young girl, I spent a lot of time creating my own magazines, sticking pictures into kind of those big blank art books, and cutting pictures out of Fair Lady, cutting pictures out of Drum, cutting pictures out of Pace. I'm probably mentioning magazines that you don't know because I'm kind of revealing my age here. And even my parents were interested in farming, so we had Farmers Weekly at home as well, and I used to cut pictures out of that. Little did I know that I was doing something that's become very important to me now in terms of activating that power within, and that's the idea of visualization, creating a mood board or a vision board. I use a vision book, so I kind of create pictures of the things that I want to achieve and set my goals and write them in my vision book, and I try and look at that vision book at least once a day. So I carry it in my bag, or I try and make it the last thing I look at night, or look at it extensively over the weekend if I've had a really busy week. And most of the things that I've put in there have transpired. It's been very rare, very seldom that something that I've put down there and made a goal and animated with pictures and sort of numbers and things that I can measure hasn't come true. So as I was growing up, I was a bit of a tomboy. So I was the youngest of 4 children, 3 older brothers and myself as the only girl and the youngest. And my mother decided that to make me more of this girl that she dreamed of having for so many years, I should go for modeling classes and ballet classes just to make me walk better and carry myself like a young girl. And so I did that, and the modeling classes led to me winning modeling competitions, and one of the modeling competitions I won was a cover girl competition with Khandyi magazines. Some of you may remember Khandyi. And that brought me to Johannesburg to do a magazine cover. And it was in being in the studio and seeing that shoot being put together and seeing the journalists and the photographers and the makeup artists, it was then that I realized I really want to do this. And it didn't click to me then that this, what I was watching and seeing, was, this environment that I'd been creating in my vision book. So I came to Johannesburg eventually after school and began auditioning for various opportunities in radio and television, and got an opportunity to read the news on Metro FM, which eventually led to an opportunity to read the news on what was then TV1 or I think now SABC3, and I became the youngest newsreader, or youngest and first black newsreader of the news, the 8 o'clock news at the time. And that was a big deal. 8 o'clock news, everyone watched at that time. There was no social media, no Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, distracting us and so on. And so it was a huge deal. And I was invited to do another magazine cover at a magazine owned by Media24, which is a subsidiary of Naspers. And at that shoot, heard of an opportunity for the position of fashion and beauty assistant for one of their magazines, which was True Love. And I thought this could be my opportunity to get into magazines. I loved the electronic media side, but I was quite interested in finding out about the magazine industry. So I went for the interview, thinking that it's a job that matches this kind of status I had as a primetime newsreader, and got the job. But when I did it, I found that it wasn't quite that glamorous. The fashion and beauty assistant's name looks very glamorous on a magazine, but actually the work that you do is sort of getting drinks for everybody and looking after people on shoots and taking clothes back to stores once the shoot is done, and taping the shoes with tape so that they don't get messed up and you and I can buy them again from the stores once they've been taken back. So it wasn't glamorous at all. And I did think, I'm above this, I don't need this, I read the news with very famous people, everyone knows who I am, and I shouldn't be doing this. And I'm really glad that I listened to the inner voice that just said, do it. Humble yourself and just do it. And that was the first time that intuition, that inner voice, that power within, once you harness it and listen to it, kind of directed me towards something that later turned out to be meaningful. So I did the job, did well in it, and was promoted to fashion and beauty editor. And when Naspers was repositioning True Love at around 1994-95, soon after our first democratic elections, I was there in the right place at the right time to then be appointed editor, and became the youngest editor of a national magazine, and stayed in that position for about 8 years, and transformed the magazine and the brand with the team to be the biggest selling women's magazine in the country at the time. I then decided I wanted to take some time out. I knew then I wanted to be an entrepreneur and have my own media business, but I felt there were some gaps. I wanted international work experience. I wanted to study further. I had actually completed my studying by correspondence. I started my degree at Wits and then completed through UNISA when my media career took off. And I had a BA in communications and industrial psychology then, and a certificate in media management from Stellenbosch University. But I felt I needed to do more. I wanted to study further, and Harvard had always been a dream for me that I wanted to make a reality. What was interesting then was that as soon as I expressed the wish and the desire to work abroad, an opportunity came for a job in Paris to head up South African tourism, to really be the head of the office there and drive business and leisure travelers to South Africa. And initially I thought, but this has nothing to do with media. I was hoping for an international media job. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized that what I was doing as editor of True Love was marketing a brand to a particular audience, and obviously creating great content. And with the tourism job, I would also be marketing a brand, South Africa, to a particular audience of business and leisure travelers. And I thought, well, actually, this is an opportunity I should take, and it would allow me to also serve my country in the tourism division or tourism aspect. And so I took the job, moved to Paris, and was there for about 2 years. And again there, the learning for me was just trusting your instinct, realizing that the things we want in life don't always come packaged in the manner that we expect. it wasn't a media job internationally, it was a tourism job, but it still had some of the benefits that I would have wanted to have in a media job, and it still tapped into skills that I had developed in my media position. I then, towards the end of my 2 years there, applied at Harvard Business School to do an MBA. I'm quite a big procrastinator, so I kind of applied at the last minute, on the last day, and the last hour of the last deadline, which I wouldn't, I'm working on that. It's definitely a work in progress for me. But yeah, I wouldn't recommend that to anyone. But what was interesting there was that in the time that I was at Media 24, I built a really good relationship with the then CEO of Naspers, Koos Becker, who is now the chairman of Naspers. And he said, whenever you're ready to study, we'll pay for your studies, and then you can come back and work for the company thereafter, or start your business, and we can support you in the business that you start. And I chose the latter. I chose entrepreneurship rather than working for them. But I started the business in partnership with them. And what I always tell young people about my learning from that is that there is value still, even now, in the age of the millennials, where there's so many opportunities, especially for dynamic, intelligent, well-qualified people like yourselves. There's still a lot of value in just staying a little longer and building a depth of experience and building a depth of relationships that we can tap into at a later stage. Even if you leave, to obviously leave on a positive note, where even if you work for another company, you can still call people that you worked with before, and they can help you and support you, or you can help them and support them. And I've tried to maintain those relationships, not with everybody, but with certain key people, and it certainly proved useful for me. And in 2007, so I finished my MBA in 2005, and then launched Ndalo Media, firstly with Destiny magazine, which was really something that came out of an observation of women at business school, at Harvard Business School, in terms of just watching how they consumed media. On the one hand, they consumed a lot of business content, and on the other, a lot of fashion and lifestyle content. And it occurred to me that there wasn't a publication or a media platform that brought these two interest areas together in a very integrated way. And that's really how Destiny was born. And over time, over the past 10 years, business has grown to have 6 divisions: print publishing, which consists of Destiny and Destiny Man, and we've recently added L and L Decoration to that. We've recently acquired the licenses for that, which Cliff Decker helped us finalize with our principals in Paris. And we now have a digital publishing business, which consists of DestinyConnect.com, DestinyMan.com, MentorFeed, which is our new online mentorship platform, Good Schools Report, which is a digitized version of our long-standing Good Schools listing that looks at the best schools in the country, government and private, that have 100% pass rates and allows people to do searches and comparisons of schools. Sawubona, which is our online platform, and then the L digital platforms. On the content marketing side, we do work with various companies like Liberty, Toyota, SAA, APSA, really publishing for those companies. So for APSA, for example, we publish all their newsletters that go out to their 800,000 policyholders. And then events, book publishing, and the division we're launching later this year, television side, with Project One Way South Africa and the L Africa collection. So that's what the business has become over time. As I mentioned, the common thread being positively impacting lives. We ask ourselves, before we do anything, will it impact lives positively? Will it build rather than burn? Will it enhance rather than destroy? We also choose our charities quite carefully and focus primarily on youth, male and female, women and children, and entrepreneurs. And those are just the logos of some of our entrepreneurship, our CSI initiatives. Now, I'd like to share with you now just some of the learnings, very quickly, 10 learnings that have stood out for me from this idea of harnessing the power within, and that have kind of come through from my journey. I'm still a student in many of them. I haven't mastered all of them at all. But there are things I live by and try and remind myself and others of as often as I can. The most important thing, I think, to have that grounding of tapping into a power or a source within is to have a clear vision of what one wants and to have a strong sense of self-belief. Marianne Williamson, who is one of my favorite spiritual authors, I don't know if any of you are familiar with her, Celia Bohang is nodding. She says, the vision you create all starts with the thought. You're not going to work a miracle in your environment, but in your mind, because mind is cause and the world is effect. We change the world by changing the thoughts we think about the world. I don't know about you, but it's taken me quite a long time to realize that whatever circumstances I find myself in are the result of thoughts I've been thinking. So my present is the result of my previous thoughts, and my future will be the result of my present thoughts. So it's just so critical to control our thoughts, and a basic and big part of harnessing that power within is to have control over our thoughts. I recently watched a speech that J.K. Rowling gave at the Harvard University graduation, where she spoke about just how down and out she was before the whole Harry Potter mega success that she experienced. And I mean, in a very short period of time, I think within 10 years, Harry Potter became a $15 billion enterprise, and she became the first billionaire author. But just before that happened, she was on welfare, she made a huge mess of her life, in her words, and she was about to give up on herself. But one thing she also realized was the power of her thoughts, and not just thoughts, but also the fact that you can use those thoughts to imagine a better reality. That creativity actually happens through that process of imagination. And she said, in retrospect, looking back on her life, what she's realized is that we do not need magic to change the world. We carry all the power we need inside ourselves already. We have the power to imagine better. We have the power to think better and create a better reality for ourselves. The current issue of Destiny Man has Lebo M on the cover, who is the co-creator of the hugely successful Lion King series. I'm sure many of you have traveled to London, to New York, and have gone to Broadway or West End. This show is always packed and doing phenomenally well, and full of South Africans, and very much spearheaded by Lebo M. And in this particular issue, he quotes and writes Bryce Courtney, and in fact talks about The Power of One, which is a movie he worked on with one of his colleagues from The Lion King. And Bryce Courtney is late. He's a South African advertising director and author, and I think he's had some of the most powerful things to say around this idea of controlling our thoughts and harnessing the power within. And he says, if you don't know where you are going, then how will you get there? Visualize, make pictures in your mind, see the destination, imagine your arrival, dream in perfect detail, see yourself the way you want to be when you arrive, see yourself arriving, make yourself a roadmap and study it every day until you know the way and the destination by heart. He also says, the power of one is above all things the power to believe in yourself, often well beyond any latent ability you may have previously demonstrated. The mind is the athlete, the body is simply the means it uses to run faster or longer, jump higher, shoot straighter, kick better, swim harder, hit further, or box better. So again, I think just really powerful reflections on this idea of controlling our thoughts, creating our reality, visualizing where we want to be and where we want to go, and realizing that control of our minds is the control of our destiny. The second learning that I think is important when one thinks about the power within is a commitment to excellence in what we do, in every area of our lives. And it's an easy one to kind of write off as a cliche, but very few people really commit themselves to being extraordinary. It's quite easy, I believe, to be extraordinary because so many people are satisfied with ordinary. It's quite easy to stand out as a result of just deciding that I'm always going to go the extra mile. As they say, go the extra mile, it's never crowded. Cory Booker, the junior United States Senator, and Obama to be, as some have said, says how we live our lives is how we live our days is how we live our lives. So each day builds up to our life story and our legacy. And speaking to the idea of excellence, Ted Kay, who's a cartoonist and writer, says, every job is a self-portrait of the person who does it. Autograph your work with excellence. And again, here, I emphasize this, it's one of my favorite quotes, I emphasize to young people that whether you dislike the job, you dislike the person that you're doing the job for, always autograph your work with excellence. Because those people pass, you move on to other jobs, but what you do and how one handles one's work is part of one's reputation, and that you carry with you wherever you go. So if excellence is what you've autographed your work with, then excellence is what you carry with you wherever you go. The third learning I'd like to talk about is the idea of mastering ourselves. We focus very much on power being about mastering others, having power over others. But the most powerful people and the truest and most potent power is that of self-mastery. And Lao Tzu has said, knowing others is intelligence, knowing yourself is true wisdom, mastering others is strength, mastering yourself is true power. John Maxwell has said, I can predict your long-term success if you show me your daily habits. And certainly one of my daily habits that I'm trying to work on is this idea of not, procrastinating. I get things done, but not always at the time that I should. But this is really, for me, I think, where many of us come short. We know where we want to go. We have these big dreams, but we're not building these blocks on a daily basis that take us in that direction. It's like wanting that summer body and building the blocks every day, going to gym in the morning. Team 5 a.m. as Onge would say. She wakes up at 5 a.m. in the morning to go to gym. That's the slog, that's the test, I think, of how much we want what we want, is what are you doing daily towards achieving that goal. And within that, obviously, self-mastery is very much about controlling our thoughts. As Frank Alcor has said, watch your thoughts, they become words, watch your words, they become actions, watch your actions, they become your habits, watch your habits, they become your character, watch your character, it becomes your destiny. Lebogang mentioned the idea of serving, doing work that has purpose, and I think that is critically important because while we need to be clear about our goals and need to be clear about where we're going and need to be clear about ensuring that we reach our fullest potential, we have to ensure that what we're doing is not just for our own benefit, but it's for the benefit of humanity. It's for everyone else's benefit as well. Howard Washington Thurman has said, don't ask yourself what the world needs, ask yourself what makes you come alive, and do that because the world needs people who have come alive. So the idea of being passionate and giving the best of oneself and thinking of it in terms of what one can offer the world. Oprah Winfrey, who I think is a wonderful example of living with purpose, excuse the typo there, the headline, has said, you do not have to work for an NGO in a third world country in order to live a life that's of service. When I was 30 years old, I started to realize that it was my whole life, not just parts of my life, but my whole life that was a prayer, an offering in service first to myself. To become a fully actualized human being, I did that through my actions and interactions with others. When I realized that, that's when things started to change and the journey of the Oprah Winfrey Show began. At a spiritual or metaphysical level, I do think that once we align ourselves with the greater purpose of moving not just ourselves forward, but the whole of humanity, I think we align ourselves with that energy of the universe. I think the universe and the purpose of life is all about growth and progress. A seed that's put in the ground doesn't just lie there. Its purpose is to grow and become something better. Any seed or animal or anything or creature, its purpose is growth. Our purpose is growth. And I think that when our work is aligned with our own growth, but also the growth of others, we align ourselves with a very positive energy that does propel us forward and makes our dreams a reality. And Tua Roberts has said, if your purpose and calling are only about you, then you are not real, because you are being built in order to build others. Your purpose is to be built, then to use your unique gifts and talents to build other people. And that's really what it's about. If you're not building other people, you don't find fulfillment in what you're doing. And of course, I guess there is purpose in making crime pay, right? Yeah. So, yeah, make crime pay, become a lawyer. Now, as we pursue our goals, as we pursue our destinies, we're bound to encounter adversity, we're bound to encounter failure. And I've certainly had my fair share of that as well. And I think that what really determines the winners from the losers and those who prevail and those who don't is our attitude towards adversity, our attitudes towards failure. My favorite description of growth and pain and dealing with adversity and embracing failure is this one by Cynthia Orchelli, who says, "For a seed to achieve its greatest expression, it must come completely undone. The shell cracks, its insides come out, and everything changes. To someone who doesn't understand growth, it would look like complete destruction." And yet it isn't. And again, it underlies this idea that all life, all existence is about growth. That's the goal of everything that is living. It's about growth. So our greatest responsibility is to ensure our own growth, and that whatever we're doing to ensure our own growth ensures the growth of others. And our dear Madiba says, "A winner is a dreamer who never gives up whether there's adversity or failure." And to quote myself, failure is an opportunity to learn and to do better next time. It's part of the path to greatness, which was never meant to be smooth. I strongly believe that whatever goal we have is actually not so important. The most important thing is the person we become as we pursue that goal. And I also have found that we're never meant to be the person we were when we first conceived the goal. A huge part of our journey in life, I think, is preparing us to be the person who deserves that goal and the person who can make the most of that goal. People will never forget how you make them feel. Your legacy is every life you've touched. Feel everything with love, because with every moment you are building your legacy. So whether you are in a legal firm, a consulting firm, in media, I think that idea of doing things with love and compassion is key. I think love or compassion is such an important part of business. That idea of compassion, it does pay, and it certainly does have a positive impact on the bottom line. And one of my favorites that I've learned over the years is the idea of silencing the noise. So often we have ideas and things that we want to do, and we talk to them about people, and that first bit of questioning or criticism just makes us kind of shrivel back into our shell, and we don't want to talk about it anymore, and we don't want to pursue the idea anymore. Even in a company environment where we're sitting in a boardroom brainstorming, we come up with an idea or suggestion, and it's questioned and challenged. I'm sure that happens even more so in your environment, where everyone is brilliant at kind of challenging ideas, poking holes at arguments, and so on. And the temptation to be quiet and to comply is huge. Steve Jobs, who I believe is one of the greatest entrepreneurs ever and a huge believer, which I'm sure you've seen if you've read his book, in the idea of meditation and going back into the silence, says, don't let the noise of others' opinions drown out your own inner voice, drown out that power within your intuition. And Stephen Richards has said, when you connect to the silence within you, that is when you can make sense of the disturbance going on around you. And personally, I try and make time, mornings and evenings, to connect with that silence within me, to spend a bit of time meditating, thinking about the day, trying to visualize the outcomes that I do want, trying to be positive and kind of see what results do I want in that particular day. And when I haven't done that, my day just doesn't feel the same. It's not as successful. I don't feel as much in control. And interestingly, Mahatma Gandhi was asked about meditation in an article I read a while back, and he was obviously huge on the idea of meditation. And they said, but when you're so busy, what do you do on busy days? Because it can take time, and it sometimes makes sense to just get up and get started with whatever you're doing and not spend time meditating. And he said, on those busy occasions when I'm more stressed and more busy, I wake up earlier and maybe spend even more time meditating, because that's when you need the centering even more, and you need to listen to that inner voice and get even more in touch with your intuition. Persistence and faith. Steve Jobs actually said that he believes the difference between those who succeed and those who don't is the degree of persistence, how much they persist, and how much with persistence obviously comes faith. You can't persist in something if you don't have faith and belief. Michael Bloomberg says, I don't do doubt and I don't do bad days. Running organizations is tough enough, but having a bad day is a choice. And that is so powerful. I believe. And how many times do we do doubt? How many times do we spend our moments and our thoughts on things that we don't want to happen? We spend so much more time thinking about what we don't want to happen and far less time thinking about what we do want to happen. When we visualize, we will often visualize more clearly and more readily the things that we don't want to happen. And if you believe in the idea that thoughts become things and that we do manifest what we think, it's no wonder then that we encounter chaos and challenges so often, because we create and think about the things that could go wrong, the chaos and challenges in our lives. And I think when you have faith and decide that you're not going to be doubtful, I do think great things happen, and I do think that the people who, like Michael Bloomberg, say they don't entertain doubt, manifest situations in their lives that support that. Rhonda Byrne, author of The Secret, says, ask, believe, receive. Believing contains no doubt. Believing does not waver. Believing is about absolute faith and remains steadfast despite what is happening in the outside world. When you have mastered believing, you have mastered life. And I believe we should persist until we see progress and continue to persist until we see the pinnacle. And that doesn't mean we should persist in the wrong direction, or something. If something is clearly giving us signals that it's not working, certainly we should take that feedback and make a change, but that doesn't change the fact that we should still persist towards a particular goal. Maybe the method of getting there needs to be adjusted and changed, but the goal, if it's important to us, certainly doesn't change, it shouldn't change. I do believe that goals are the instruments of growth. If the purpose of life is growth, then it's through those goals and desires that that growth happens. Something that I believe in is this idea of I amness, and this will get a little bit more spiritual, but I'm a spiritual person, and certainly, you can take from this what makes the most sense to you. But this idea of what you put behind I am, it's a biblical idea, is one that I believe in strongly. And Muhammad Ali is a powerful example of the power of I am. Before he became a champion, he said, I am the greatest. I said that even before I knew I was. And what's important, I think, to take from this is, what is your I amness? What do you put after I am? Because more often than not, that defines our reality. That does become a fact in our lives. And where does this come from? From a biblical point of view, it comes from Exodus, verse 13 to 15. The burning bush scene in the Old Testament, where Moses said to God, suppose I go to the Israelites and say to them, the God of your fathers has sent me to you, and they ask me, what is his name? Then what shall I tell them? And God says to Moses, I am who I am. This is what you are to say to the Israelites. I am has sent me to you. And God also said to Moses, say to the Israelites, the Lord, the God of your fathers, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob has sent me to you. This is my name forever, the name you shall call me from generation to generation. And if we go back to this idea that the power within is the power that animates all life, whether you call it source, whether you call it God, that from a spiritual perspective demonstrates the power of I am and where that comes from. However, from a non-spiritual perspective, if you believe in the idea of affirmations, if you follow just the way sports people train and how they prepare for victory, they affirm and use affirmations and say what it is they want to achieve. They visualize the game, they visualize the match, they visualize the result that they want. It's the same principle, just the idea of defining what it is that you want and what you want to achieve. And metaphysicists generally say that the best time for us to think about our I ams is the time when we're about to sleep. To spend that time, and I certainly do this, saying what it is you want to be. So whether it's I am the greatest, I am successful, I am organized, I am not a procrastinator. That because the conscious mind, which is the one that argues with us about the things we say and believe, goes to sleep. And it's the subconscious mind that stays awake and controls our bodily functions, controls our breathing, and is then impressed by whatever impressions we've left in our conscious mind while we sleep. The belief is that that is the best time to do it, because it's then impressed in one's subconscious mind, and the ability to internalize and hopefully manifest that is then strengthened. I believe it, and I've certainly seen it work in the time that I've been using it in my life. So defining your I amness, I think is powerful. And hey, you become the greatest champion in the world. He certainly is the greatest, and that's how we remember him, right?
Yeah.
We remember him from that definition. There's no one else. Even who's the gentleman who just had that big fight? Yes, I mean, do we call him the greatest? He doesn't know that. We don't know what his I am. And finally, I think, to tie back to our topic of harnessing the power within, I've learned more and more that true power is really the power within. We can't lead others effectively if we haven't mastered ourselves. And I think this can be used in even a way that is not necessarily positive. And that's obviously not a good thing, but it just underlies the fact that it's not about is good or bad. It's not about good versus evil. It's about the extent to which you use the power within and you believe in your ability to make your thoughts reality. And Norman Vincent Peale, the author of The Power of Positive Thinking, started a church in the US which speaks to this idea, mind science, and sort of Christian science and mind science is what he called it. He's obviously late now. And many of the now very successful business people in the US attended that church as young people. And at a very young age learned this idea of the power of the mind, the power of our thoughts. And he believed that that's the most important thing that we can teach our children, is that true power is within. But one of the children who went to that church every Sunday was Donald Trump. Yep. And whether you like him or whether you don't, that's one person who controls his mind and has unfailing confidence in himself. And, whether it's on the right basis or the wrong basis, he has unfailing confidence in himself. Has seen himself in that White House for many, many years, long before Hillary Clinton thought about it. If you look back at old interviews, he was talking about the White House when his hair was less dramatic than it is. There's tremendous power in it, and if it's something that you haven't explored, I'd say it's worth just reading up about and seeing how you can apply it to your life in a way that works best for you. And that is why I was quite touched and really excited that you had chosen this topic, because I think that this is the true power. I think if you haven't figured this out, it doesn't matter how many degrees you have, it doesn't matter what business school or university you went to or law school you went to, it doesn't matter what top legal firms you work for. If you don't have this figured out, you may succeed for a while, but you'll come short at some stage. I think life forces us at some stage to look right in and say, where does my true power come from? And often the answer is, it comes from within. All the best. Thank you so much.